This episode of Earth 911 TV is brought to you by Dell Reconnect, computer recycling made easy.
Hey folks, on today's show, we're taking a look at hybrid plug-in vehicles, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm John P. Welcome to Earth 911 TV. Okay, before we get started, let me go ahead and tell you that I own 3 plug-in hybrid vehicles. And I own a few other totally not green vehicles, but that's a different story. The point being, people are always asking me about the plug-ins. So I'm going to give you the straight scoop about the ownership experience. We're also going to take a close look at the good and the bad of one of my vehicles in just a minute. But before we get to the car, let's talk about something more important: how it changes people. You're probably thinking that owning an electric vehicle cuts down on emissions and makes you greener, which I guess it will, although there's actually some debate about the impact of all the battery technology on the environment. But what I really mean is, having an electric car will change the actual way you drive. Let me give you an example. I used to drive a 400 horsepower sports car, and I went through a lot of tires because I have a bit of a lead foot. But that changed instantly when I got the electric car. That's because driving an electric vehicle is kind of like playing a game. How long can I make the battery last before it runs out? And the car makers have even gamified the experience by putting animated graphics and goals to encourage you to drive efficiently. As a result, I no longer put pedal to the metal when accelerating, and I slowly stop to capture as much of the battery regeneration as possible. There are a few other pros and cons, but first, let's go take a look at a plug-in hybrid. Okay, so we're going to take a look at one of my vehicles. This particular vehicle is actually the Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid. Remember, we're not just talking about hybrids, we're talking about plug-in hybrids. These are cars that not only have a battery that helps assist the motor, but the battery charges like anything else you'd plug into a wall. So, the number one thing you're going to notice anytime you encounter a hybrid plug-in is that you'll have 2 different things that look like gas tanks, okay? We've actually got a gas tank back here, just like on every other car. It looks like a normal, but on the front, we have another, quote, gas tank. This is our electric tank. And so you're gonna see that the Ford actually uses a standardized type of plug. You're gonna get this exact same plug if you have a Toyota, a GM, a Ford, a Nissan, basically everything except Tesla. They use their own proprietary system, but this is a standard plug. And this is what a standard wall charger looks like. We got this one from Siemens. It cost about $800. This one is actually weatherproof. You can even see that it's been kind of sprinkling today. It's a little wet out here. This thing has been through every kind of storm. Doesn't matter. It's fine. So about $800. This is a 240 volt system. So that means our electrician had to run a special cable inside, power, to come over here. It's not a 110 outlet because those are too slow. So this is the kind of outlet you use for like an electric range or a dryer, only now it's for charging the car. So when I get here, I plug it in up front, and you'll actually notice, interestingly, on this car, and most vehicles that have plug-ins have some sort of indicator where when you plug it in, it's going to kind of light up and show us that it is indeed charging. And this is telling us about the state of the charge. This blue ring is around 3/4 of the way full, and that tells us that we've got about 3/4 of a charge. Now, all of this power has to be routed through the system because this car has a lot more electrical componentry than a normal vehicle. And when we look under the hood, we get some more clues to that. These giant orange power cables that we see, you would never have that in a normal car. These things are for handling all the additional current of the electric battery. So there is a normal gasoline engine in this car, just like every other car, only it's a little smaller and more fuel efficient because the electric engine assists it. So that's what's under the hood. So far, it all sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, if that was all there was to it, everybody would have one, but there is one drawback, and we will see that drawback in the trunk. The reason why is we've taken a normal Ford Fusion, which you see many of these on the road, and then we put a giant battery in it so that this car can have two distinctly separate drivetrains, a complete electric drivetrain that lets it drive only on electricity for up to 20 or so miles, and a gas drivetrain. Well, you got to put a big battery somewhere, and that's where it goes, right here in the trunk. In a normal Fusion, the trunk would be from here, it would just keep going flat all the way to the back, but we have this giant battery which adds weight and takes up trunk. Now, having said that, okay, the trunk is still very usable for in-town stuff. If you go get groceries, you can easily put groceries in here, and if you have a few extras, stick them in the back seat. You can also fit a couple of bags in here. So when my wife and I take a trip down to Houston, for example, we can easily put our bags in the car and go. But if you've got a big family, if you need a lot of trunk space, you might not be able to use this as a primary vehicle. Short of that, you may think to yourself, well, with all that electrical stuff in the car, surely they skimped elsewhere. But no, they didn't. Quite the opposite. Let's take a look at the gadgets inside. All right, so we're inside the vehicle, and like I said, we've got a full contingent of goodies in here. In fact, this is technically one of the most decked out vehicles you can buy. We start out with Ford's infotainment system, which gives us a view of multiple different areas here at once. We've got kind of cellular phone activity going on up here. We've got navigation, climate control, and we've got audio controls down here. And if you just touch the screen at any point, it's going to take you into that particular feature in detail. So for example, here's our GPS. The home button takes us home, and we could select the phone. We could go to our audio controls, full HVAC controls, and as you can see, even the heated seats are available on the screen here. So there you go, Carter, a little bit of heat for you. We've got all the niceties there, but beyond that stuff, which kind of gets to be considered basic in some vehicles now, we've got a whole range of other technologies, including parking assist, rear and front sensors that let you know when you're close to something. We also have the ability for the car to actually park itself. Yes, that's right. This vehicle is a self-parking vehicle. This button right here allows the car to parallel park itself. So when we're driving up and there's an empty space over beside us, I hit that button, I drive up, I let go of the steering wheel, put it in reverse, and it will back itself into the spot because it's full-on electric steering. So I don't have to steer it, I just have to work the brakes. Also in line with that whole electric steering thing, there's a little function right over here that is for lane keeping assist. Now what that means is the car in this area underneath the camera has front-facing cameras, and it also has, of course, all the sensors everywhere, so it knows how close it is to other things with radar. When the car detects that it is in a lane and the lane keeping assist feature is enabled, if I take my hands off the steering wheel, yes folks, you guessed it, the car will drive itself down the road. Now, they tell you not to do that. It will warn you, it'll say put your hands back on the steering wheel, etc. But I have had this vehicle on the highway at 75 miles an hour on long sloping curves and let go of the wheel and let it drive itself for like miles, and it will do it as long as there's not a lot of obstructions in the way and things like that. So we've got all sorts of features like that, plus the creature comforts that you would expect with the heated seats and the cell phone integration and all of that other stuff. So it's actually a very comfortable car. So that's a look at this vehicle. A couple more things I want to share with you. Let's go back inside. So before we wrap it up, there are just a few other things you should know. First, there aren't enough public charging stations. In fact, we've never even used one with any of our 3 plug-ins in a year. We have found a few spots with stations like at IKEA, but they charge for access and it costs more than the equivalent price of gas. Clearly, they're preying on people who have pure electrics and who really need the charge, as opposed to hybrid owners who can run on gas until electric is convenient. So you're going to have to install a charger at your home. And hopefully you can talk someone into installing one for you at work too. If you own the business like we do, this makes perfect sense and you'll always be able to fill up. Charging also needs to be faster so you get even more in the short time you may have. Our vehicles take around 3 hours to fully charge on a 220 or 240 volt circuit and basically all day to charge on 110. Electrics with even bigger batteries can take up to 8 hours on a 240 charge, and well, you just can't use 110 for those. Also, some people like me can go a long time, like a couple of months, before really even using the gas engine. So it might concern you that things could go wrong there and you wouldn't know it until you need it. But generally, I think that's an emotional concern, not a technical one. The engines do periodically perform self-maintenance and run a bit to stay lubricated and in good shape. So the way I look at it, the main benefit to a plug-in hybrid is that it saves gas around town, and I never have to worry about getting stuck when the battery's depleted. We have a friend who has to plan his trips ahead of time in case his all-electric battery gets depleted. I don't know about you, but I don't need that kind of stress in my life. I'll stick with the option to use gas or electric. So I hope that helped you better understand the plug-in hybrid vehicle experience. If you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below or tweet me at John Pose. I'm John P. See you next time.